Hi, I'm JB Miller in London,
And I'm Jim Jalamas in Brooklyn.
and this is Boomer Has It. So, Jim, what's on the docket today?
Today on Boomer Has It, we're finally confronting a topic we've been avoiding: artificial intelligence. This much hyped, much loathed technology is disrupting all aspects of human life, including journalism. And it recently hit close to home for our special guest, Michele Wucker. Michelle is a strategic advisor and global risk and economic policy expert whose insights have guided businesses, central bankers, and other policymakers towards making better decisions. She's also the best-selling author of The Gray Rhino, a book about massive, obvious, high-impact dangers charging right at us that give leaders a choice: recognize and act decisively, or freeze and get trampled, and not to be confused with the unforeseeable, unimaginable black swan, only visible in hindsight, or the elephant in the room that normalizes doing and saying nothing. A gray rhino is an obvious, visible, probable challenge. Think financial crises, COVID-19, AI, and tech disruption, or climate change. People see it coming. We talk about it sometimes a lot, but only some of us step up to face it and turn danger into ding ding opportunity. Hello, Michelle. Full
Hi, Jim and
disclosure
JB.
here.
Great to see you guys.
Yeah, great seeing you too. It's been a while.
It
I
has.
Full disclosure here, we should say we've all met years ago at media bistro parties where
It was
we
actually pre-Media Bistro, before Media Bistro was Media Bistro. It
oh,
was
it
the
hadn't
parties that
been named.
became. It didn't have a name yet.
It was
It was
somewhere in the
parties
East
in the East Village.
in the East Village. I remember, yeah, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. There was a bar in the East Village. Laurel was
Flamingo East.
yes, Flamingo
Yes.
East. Well remembered.
And we used to have invitation chains which involved fax and phone because not
Uh,
everybody had email yet.
Wait,
I
when we say
didn't.
facts, for our younger listeners, we're not talking about facts, F-A-C-T-S. We're talking about an ancient mm, communications transmission procedure.
It was just one step up from parchment, or it's chiseled into cement bricks that were delivered by by people holding the anyway, let's get started.
Um, Michelle, there was a recent article in Fortune about obvious risks facing businesses, and a lot of it was resting on your gray rhino coinage. And the reporter committed a few forced errors, like incorrectly defining gray rhino and not attributing it to you. And when we tell us a little more, you dropped a note to him. You tell
Yeah,
us what happened.
well, I was flattered. I mean, the article said, I mean, it was based on a CEO conference that Fortune did, and I was flattered that it said it's the difference between gray rhino and the black swan is the biggest thing that corporations are not understanding in risk management today. It's like a really important distinction, and they had a couple of smart people on stage talking about it. And they talked about sort of attacks on older people as related to the Nancy Guthrie case. That there have been a lot of warnings in the the community about older people being vulnerable. And so they were talking about the gray rhinos. Here's something they're warning about, and they didn't do enough. And so I find it's often very common that when people are writing about gray rhinos and black swans, well, they already know what a black swan is because that term became big in 2007, 2008, 2009 during that great financial crisis. And so they'll attribute that because they know what it is. But despite the fact that today we have this thing called the internet, and you can actually pretty easily do a search for where did the gray rhino come from? And it's pretty obvious. I cannot tell you how many reporters don't bother to do that little bit of they often will, read about it someplace else that also hasn't attributed it, and always, yeah, almost always get the definition wrong. And in this case, they were talking about it as something that you can it's you ignore it in the present, and you can see it in hindsight, which is not what the gray rhino is about. It's about looking in front of you, the thing in front of you. And sometimes it's useful looking back when people go, "Oh, it was a black swan. Nobody saw it coming." And when as a
Mm.
cop out, which is not how that term was meant to be used either. It was a reminder of uncertainty and the need to build resilient organizations that thrive in volatility.
At at the expense
So
of getting into the weeds here, in hindsight, do we look I was in banking at the time, and I can't tell you how many bankers I spoke to who were just friendly acquaintances told me, "Something's happening right now, and we're playing a game of credit musical chairs, and the bottom's gonna fall out soon." So, do we call the 2008 financial crisis a black swan or a gray rhino?
I sort of see it as a crash of gray rhinos. Crash being the wonderful zoologically correct word for a group of gray rhinos.
Oh.
Some very, very obvious ones. And sometimes when those all come together, you get some, black swan type events. Maybe, you didn't see exactly what was going to come after it, but there were a lot of gray rhinos, and particularly the housing market. As you know, I mean, I was buying I bought an apartment on the Upper West Side in 2001, and in 4 years, it almost doubled in price. And it was a first apartment, and I was thinking about making some changes in my life, so I sold it for almost twice what I had bought it for, because I could see this. And, as you know, I spent a lot of time on Wall Street as well, particularly working on emerging markets and financial crisis. And a lot of the people I knew were the smart, wonky people on Wall Street, who read Charles Kindleberger, the sort of the guru of manias, panics, and financial crashes. And they were all saying something's coming. Christine Lagarde was saying there's a financial tsunami coming. The FBI was issuing reports about mortgage fraud, and there was just this crazy, crazy run up in housing prices, which ended up being the first domino that sent everything else tumbling after
Right,
it.
right. Well,
But nobody saw anything coming.
no, no. As you get close to the top, the opacity increases. Uh, um, and then just back to this unfortunate unfortunate fortune article. Um, I'm not gonna name the journalist because, we have 7 or 8 listeners, and they're very devoted to the podcast, and I'd hate for him to be doxxed or swatted or for any of our loyal fans to call Child Protective Services as they did to Pete Buttigieg. Um, so before 2022, before the advent of ChatGPT, we would have attributed these oversights to sloppy reporting. But this being 2026, the problem is the sloppy reporting didn't come from a human. He used AI to write the story, juicy as it would have been to expose him as a fraud. Around the same time, the Wall Street Journal revealed that he's the lead writer in an AI experiment at Fortune. And it's designed to scale content production. Ugh, oh my god, I hate that word,
Yeah.
content. And he's cranked out more than 600 stories using the technology at the time of the article, and I took a look. It's 10 magazine articles a month. They're AI assisted, and they account, get ready for this, 20% of Fortune's web traffic in the second half of 2025. Most were written by that journalist. So, thoughts here. JB and Michelle, you were both beat reporters. Michelle, you were at the Milwaukee Sentinel and Dow Jones. JB, you were a cub reporter at a tender age at a weekly publication.
It was
Can
called The
either of
Verge.
you imagine using AI to cover a story?
Sure, I would just switch it on and go on holiday for a few weeks. Come back and receive
Hardy
read
har
all my
har.
great responses. No, of course not. But I mean, I don't have what was the number you said for this guy in Fortune? You said 10 a month, 10 articles
10
a
a month,
month?
10 magazine articles a month, which, and we're talking magazine size. So
It's like with
it's
3,000
gonna be
words?
longer than than the average newspaper article, feature length magazine size. So what,
Yeah.
maybe 800, 1,000 words?
Right. I mean, I had to, I was working for a weekly, small weekly paper, the Concord Patriot. I had a noon Wednesday deadline. I covered the municipal light board, the selectmen. I did business interviews, old people who had interesting stories. And when I bought a camera, they made me a photographer. It was, they couldn't believe their luck. They paid me $5 an article. And I had the greatest time. I loved it. This was decades before AI was even imagined. It was decades before the Terminator films, which introduced the concept of AI to a lot of people, I think, and the end of the world. Um, but Michelle, you've had a much more illustrious newspaper career than I have. Could you imagine using AI?
Well, I mean, it was very early in my career. I want to say that, and sometimes people today say I'm a journalist, and that drives me bonkers because that has not been on my business card since like 1992. What I do is not journalism. And although and my journalist friends are like the old guard, the amazing people who took it really, really, really seriously, and today it's a very, very different thing. You've got all the clickbaity stuff and the AI generated stuff and the sensational stuff and the corporate directed stuff, and it's more of an entertainment kind of thing. So I don't want to be called a journalist partly because what that has become,
But
and
it's
also because
not an
it's
insult.
you
I
know
mean,
it's
it's
it kind of is, and
oh no.
it's also an insult to the people like the old guard journalists because I really admire their craft and, what they did, and I do very, very different things now. This sort of, so advisory, opinions, speaking, and, very, very different work. And, but, using AI, I can actually see some uses that might be helpful. I mean, in working at Dow Jones, sometimes you'd get these like, press releases, you'd see earnings reports or things that are just, boilerplate that, doesn't require a big brain to turn into a short article. Although you definitely need a human to look and make sure that it got right. Um, and, the funny thing about how I found out about this Wall Street Journal article was I was telling a friend of mine about this, experience. And of course, I sent the guy a note. I said, I'd really like to clarify this. It's not quite right. And so he, messaged me back, said, yes, please let me know. So I messaged him. And he, to his credit, he put in a quote from what I sent him and credited me, but he kept the wrong definition in and he misspelled my name with 2 L's, which, thank you, autocorrect, which hates 2 L it hates 1 L Michelle's. So I think that was another, earlier use of AI that
Yeah,
went into there.
autocorrect. Yeah, yeah.
So anyhow, I was telling a friend of mine about this, and she says, "Was it Fortune?" I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" And she pointed me to the Wall Street Journal article, and then I went, "Oh man, it was the same guy. This is crazy." And one of the things that he said in there was, "I'm not fact checking like the New Yorker." And that touch that touches on something that's driven me crazy that, you know, that fact checking should be a really good use of AI, but with facts that are vetted by humans. And making sure that the facts that are in there are accurate. That's a big problem. I look at fact checkers way back in the day when I actually was a journalist. I remember writing an article about a company in Wisconsin and the checkers came up and they changed some of the references to Wisconsin to Minnesota. Oh,
Oops,
human error. Whoops,
wrong
right?
jurisdiction.
But
Yeah.
but also Fortune magazine is a major publication. This is not a small fly by night, it's not it
It's
shouldn't be,
serious.
clickbait source. I mean, I grew up with wasn't it Time Life? Was it one of what it was a part of the
Part of
stable of
that.
Time Life? I
I'm
mean,
not
also, I
sure.
want to put in a reference point. What got me into journalism were two men called Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. This is dating us all slightly, but journalists were heroes in my in my youth,
Yeah.
and it probably got a lot of people into journalism, and that was, investigative journalism. And in the film, maybe some of our viewers and listeners will be more familiar with the film All the President's Men with what Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. But you see the sort of what was it called? Sort of shoe leather. Was it called shoe leather reporting where they would actually get out, walk, and interview people and knock people on on their doors, and they would do the work. There was no internet. There was no AI. They were doing, and there's one of my favorite shots in the film is when they're in the Library of Congress, and they're looking up, I can't even remember exactly, looking up names or something, and the camera
Mm.
pulls up and up, and you see them surrounded by a sea of stacks of books, and then and you see how much work it was. They did
Yeah.
that was work. Journalists did a lot of work. They weren't, but they also weren't expected to produce what 10 articles, all this I was gonna say footage, but wordage on a weekly basis for clicks. And the Washington Post gave them time to work on this story. Thank you, Washington Post is still running. So the whole financial infrastructure of journalism has changed. And you're not a journalist anymore, probably for good reason, because it's a tough business to be in, right? You found a much more modern approach to a profession that journalism, led into. And I'd imagine you're using a lot of your journalistic
Those
skills.
are great skills. Getting, talking to people, the research, the checking things, making sure you got things right, the curiosity, the, kind of pushing back, the interaction with the editors going, "Hey, are you sure this is right?" And copy editors back in the day were all worth their weight in gold, platinum, whatever's
Oh,
more
we love
valuable.
copy editors. Yes, we
Yes.
respect and admire and revere
You,
copy
you
editors.
know, I have to speak in contrast. I feel a little envious. I always have. The way I entered journalism as a freelancer was a little like if you could imagine John Belushi from Animal House pitching stories, and with the incentive that I could get free trips and free stuff, free booze, cigars, but books, free stuff. That was my sort of my approach to journalism. And
Shame on you, Jim.
shame on me is right. I'm chasing. Believe me, I'm chasing. I mean,
The media parties were good. I gotta say that, not ju I mean, the one that we met at, we paid for our drinks, but I gotta say some of the, launch parties and this party and that, the food and the wine were quite good.
well,
I will
Michelle
say
and
that.
one thing I will, I'm proud of is I tipped heavily at these parties, and writers are notoriously cheap, but we had a feature writers group, and I'd hear you all talk and say words like ethics. I was like, huh? Oh, and it was amazing to me that I would file a story for the front of the book of a publication. I'd get $1 a word. I was living in a cheap apartment. It felt great. And then I'd get a deluge of calls. A copy editor would call, a fact checker would call, and the editor would call. And I'm like, what do all these people want? I'm done. And it was a slow climb to really respect the industry and get, and unfortunately, the barriers to entry have declined, and we have citizen journalists like I kind of was, but committing, terrible, terrible breaches of ethical guidelines in
But I'm
journalism.
sorry to interrupt, but are those journalists? That's opinion. That's not journalism. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Are you referring to websites, YouTube videos,
I'm
people
talking
who
about people who call themselves citizen journalists, who have no idea the difference between opinion and news writing.
they're not actually journalists. They call themselves I don't know if I would define them as journalists, even if they define themselves
If
as
if I attend a
really.
protest, for example, I'll see some some of these people actually create badges for themselves that say citizen journalist. And some of them, to their credit, have press passes, official press passes from whatever city or region we're in, and they're the real deal. That they may be freelancing for Reuters, wire service or a newspaper, but um,
Alright, but that's
that's where
different.
we
I mean,
stand.
the 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 paper that I work for, that doesn't exist. There were 2 papers in Concord, Massachusetts, 2 competing weekly papers, and every city had there was a Village Voice in New York, there was the Boston Phoenix and the Real paper. They had these wonderful weekly, alternative papers. It was sort of the more, the sort of hippie press, but they
A
broke a
cool
lot of
place to write.
stories. Sorry?
It was the cool place to
It
write.
was oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were cool papers to read, but they also broke stories,
They
they covered
did.
the music scene, they covered
They
the
did
cultural scene,
serious
they
stuff.
broke stories, and we've lost that, there must be some citizen journalists who are sort of replacing, right? They are working in the place of those wonderful weeklies that don't exist anymore. Is that
Yeah,
right?
and I
Is
gotta
that
give credit to some of the people who, don't even call themselves journalists, but these sort of, as cell phone videos of things that are happening have been really an important addition to transparency. But you've got that, then you've got the kind of do my own research citizen journalists, which some of whom are really good, some of whom are not. And then you don't have the filters the way that you used to. You don't have some of the screening that you used to, and I think that journalists are also asked to do a lot more to go on camera, the audio, the video, the different types of being present, being out there, which many of which have their advantages. But people are being asked to do very different things, and the financial pressures, as you said, are very, very difficult. A lot of advertising has gone to social media, things like that, and so, I think a lot of traditional media has been struggling, and the question of how do you respond to that is really tough. On the other hand, we have things like Substack and other places where experienced independent voices, can actually get paid without dealing with what sometimes is quite fraught organizational politics, but it's a totally different landscape. When I was in graduate school and doing some freelancing, I could, you could make a graduate school level living doing that. And I
Sure.
can't even imagine what I would tell a starting out journalist these days. And I think probably a lot of the ones starting out, they're going to have to be, the people whose families can support certain things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
a whole
you know
different
they
world.
I live in a young community, and when the 20 or 30 somethings find out I've been a writer, I am a writer, they ask, "How do I break in?" And I say, "I don't know. I don't really know." That's what I've been saying up till now, but I recently saw a really terrific op-ed piece in the Washington Post that I'm still reading, newspaper I'm still reading, full disclosure, uh, by Will Leitch, Leitch. Great writer. He writes for New York Magazine. And I needed to refresh my memory of who he was. He was an early founder of BuzzFeed News. He has a blog, he has a Substack, he has a podcast, and I come to the conclusion that if you wanna strike out as a writer or a journalist, it's DIY.
Yeah, I think Substack
You're
is a
not gonna
useful
get hired unless you can get hired for a wire service or a daily. You gotta strike out on your own, and I remember naively going to the Wall Street Journal years ago. There was an opening and I knew someone, and she looked at my clips and she loved them, and she said, we're getting people from wire services and they've been writing 10 stories a week." And I was like, "Oh, right. They're reporters." And you probably did that, Michelle, at
Oh, yeah,
Dow
Dow
Jones.
Jones Emerging Markets Report, we had 3 market reports a day plus all the other stories on top of that and, stalking presidents and finance ministers when they were in town for conferences and, you know, getting the president of Mexico mad at me for asking about, side accords to NAFTA and, you it was a lot. It was a lot, a lot, a lot.
A lot, and then and JB, I imagine when you were in Concord, you know, doing your gumshoe work, you probably covered, like, town hall meetings and
Yeah. Oh,
sewer
yes.
easements.
I covered everything, town hall, as the municipal light board meeting, everything, the town meeting. It was really fun. And it was, yeah, it was a lot of fun. But now it's a totally different delivery system. You sort of have your own delivery system, but it's put the onus is on you to build up a readership. I mean, I have a Substack, but I've, I've none of a very large circle of readers yet. I'm trying to build that, and we have a YouTube channel. It's very DIY, but if you can hit it right, you can reach a far greater potential readership and viewership than you could have done unless you were attached to a major newspaper, right? Isn't that fair? Or or mag. I did some stuff for the New York Times years ago, and that was everybody read it, and but now you're on your own. Um, but
That's how.
yeah, the rewards are potentially good, but they reward clickbait, and we're getting back to the AI discussion. You know, it reward. That's the problem. There are financial rewards to being lazy, and there didn't used to be because there used to be copy editors that would that would call you on it. No one's calling you on it now. And what's that great quote? It was at Mark Twain that a lie will go around the world before truth has had time to uh, tie its shoelaces. So I just something like
It's
that.
it's
But
so true. It's so
it's
true. And I
really
remember,
bold.
even the really good copy editors, I mean, they did some amazing saves. Sometimes they were really obnoxious, but in contrast to the lack of copy editors and I had a big problem with the New York Times itself, when they were writing about my work. It was the summer that they fired the copy editors and made them apply back for their jobs, which I only
Oh,
found out later. But they were doing a story about the gray rhino, and they tried to change the definition. They tried to attribute it to Chinese state media. And, I emailed them, my friends emailed them. I had people on staff in different parts trying to email, didn't hear anything back. And it was crazy. And I'm like, don't you think it's news that an American who wrote this book is the source of this? And but of course it didn't go with their narrative of, oh, China doesn't want any foreign intellectuals, any foreign ideas there. And
Sure.
it took me to, like, practically setting myself on fire to get attention. And a couple years later, they started in with it again. And by that time I knew someone else who was able to get through to the standards desk, to the business desk, and they finally made a change. And of course, they have never mentioned gray rhinos again after that. But I'm kind of glad. But if there are human errors, and if an error gets in, and if the humans are convinced enough that they're right, it doesn't get changed. And of course, AI is very, very confident of its answers, and you have no idea if it's right or not. So I think it's a really tough situation, but I do think that there's a huge opportunity for using AI to do some of that fact checking, but only if you can have a way to get humans to feed it to make sure that things are accurate. And there's a lot of talk in the AI world about sovereign AI, that your AI within your organization. So you're not the questions that you ask are not being fed into something out into the ether, that you're not accidentally sharing business
oh,
secrets
right.
with secret sauce with some third party. And for me, I look at these large language models, and they scoop in everything from the internet. And of course, everything on the internet is true, right? Because it's on the internet. I had this argument in the late '90s with what do you call it? Somebody who was convinced that Y2K was a real thing and the world was going to end, and foreign mercenaries were going to come and attack us through looking at the tape on the back of the road signs and things. But and I
God.
swear it's absolutely, absolutely true. But basically, a model, like what do they call it? A small language model, a custom language model, someplace where you know that everything that has gone in there has been vetted and is legit as far as serious vetting can tell you. And of course, the New York Times stories that so-called newspapers of record even make big mistakes in those areas.
Yeah, I saw that, my work as a content strategist, I worked with a large insurance company, and they were experimenting with AI tools. They had a proprietary one, and it was a closed source model. So every query we made had been vetted and was ready to go and reduce their risk entirely. But we're talking about using these large language models to talk to the world. And just going back to this Fortune article that misquoted you, I read through the whole piece. It was long. It had some clickbait on there, which it kind of insulting in a way, using the name Nancy Guthrie. Um, I can only imagine it really rose top to the top of search. Otherwise, the article read like something I would have written for, when I was writing for corporations and banks, where they asked me to go to a conference, quote people, pull out 3 or 4 data points, or summarize some important bullets for the reader to walk away from. And I have to tell you, this was one of the most unremarkable, dull, dreary pieces I have ever read. Here are some of the takeaways. For companies without Fortune 100 budgets, both executives converged on 3 affordable, underutilized baselines. Secure transportation. That means don't put your executives in Ubers where they could be kidnapped. Don't let your board members use Gmail. And keep your security on all the time, your security protocols. It was sort of like duh. Um, so we're talking about quality of the reporting, which is dreary, but as media companies use AI to scale their content. So we're talking about quantity. What's going to come out of this? What's going to happen? I mean, this was just I don't know who would have read this and said, "Oh, very good. Check off bullet number one. I won't put our leading executives into Ubers anymore because they could get kidnapped." Or uh, board members, don't use Gmail. Send that out right now. Um, Thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's that the quality versus quantity, and people do pay for quality, and there are still some publications that do that. I mean, I've subscribed to The Economist since the beginning of time. I remember being in graduate school, and I was on the subway at a very, very late hour, and was reading The Economist at, like, midnight, coming home, probably from one of these, pre-media bistro. Actually, no, that was after graduate school, but it might have been coming back from one of these parties where I was reading the Economist on the subway, which I often did throughout my life, and there's some people across commented they were really impressed by this, but I still trust the Economist. I think Financial Times I still trust, but I think you've really got to be constructively critical about the publications that you are reading and being much more selective. And I teach risk at University of Virginia, and we've been talking about that with some of our students. And do students are they developing the critical skills to look at something and decide whether the AI has got it right or not? One of the things I've been doing is showing them, like, I took notes during one of our online classes, and I showed the note to them. I said, "See how this is really general, how it's they talked about blah, blah, blah. They talked about this, but I'm like, "Okay, well, what
Right.
did they say about it?" It's not good at judgment, at picking out really the key insights and takeaways. There was a really good essay recently, or really maybe about 6 months ago, and I forget where, but if you look for a Delvish, Delvish, it's like the AI language. We're going to delve into. We're going to explore. We're going to, and and I've seen it a lot with policy students since long before AI. So I suspect that some of the AIs have been trained on some really bad policy writing. But it tends to summarize, and it's not good at putting things into context. And perhaps it'll get better over time, and you see all this criticism of, how much it uses M dashes, and I'm sure that the models have started to take that into, consideration. You're all of a sudden not gonna see the M dashes anymore. Uh,
Like a lazy college student using M dashes to
Oh,
avoid, fine punctuation points, yeah.
yeah, and
that's
now
like
I'm worried about using if I use them, are they gonna think I'm AI? And I talked to some people, they're talking about their niece submitted a paper and, they knew that the niece had not used AI, and it came back in an AI detector as, "Oh, yeah, definitely used AI because she was, yeah, probably using language that, it had like what it had trained on. Or the Authors Guild a few months ago put out a test. They pulled some of their own content from decades ago and sent it through several AI checkers. And only a couple of them said, no, this is not AI written. And the probabilities in the other ones were all over the
wait,
place.
sorry, I'm totally confused by this. You're saying that non-AI produced content is being flagged as AI produced.
Yes.
Now that's just
False accusation.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's so confusing to me, and that's probably confusing a lot of people. So we can't trust we can't trust anything at this point. I'm like I read Dickens. I just read some Charles Dickens. It's all AI produced. It doesn't. I don't think that reads authentically at all. I mean, it could be. You could just put any novel through an AI model. It's going to come up. It's going to flag something, won't it? Because AI is based on
Who
this old
knows? Well,
content. Is
it's
that right?
it's getting better, and then I read somewhere that, if you ask AI to, for its opinion on different things, it's gonna prefer things that were written by its own, uh, output. So it discriminates against the other LLMs. I mean, you just don't know what's what. And a big problem is that one of the things that you do when you're a cub reporter, when you're a junior researcher at a bank or at a wherever, is you are developing those critical skills. And so by by delegating a lot of that to AI, I mean, first of all, who knows about the quality just as yeah, you don't know about the quality of something an intern does. You know to check it extra carefully. But you're not developing those skills. So what's going to happen with the next generations coming up when nobody has had the opportunity to develop critical thinking and writing skills on their own? And that's really scary.
You
But
come up
isn't
with
it?
words like, Delvish.
I don't even know if it's the next generation. I mean, there must be millions of people now who are reading a lot of AI content and just accepting it as real. We're talk when we talk about there's a heyday of copy editors and newspaper reporters and editing, this is a while ago now. And there's a whole other generation that's already grown up since then. So I've and we know this for a fact because so many people believe stuff that's nonsense, like the 2020 election, was stolen. I mean, there's a lot of nonsense out there, and people are believing it. Sorry, I sound like the pessimist of the three of us. I'd like to hear some more optimistic response to my dour.
Well, I
my,
mean, there are people who are conscious of this and thinking about it and trying to get to a good place. I think you're seeing a lot of pushback against AI in all sorts of different ways, whether it's the data centers or the slop. I mean, that was the word of the year last year for good reason. I mean, people hate it. So I think that backlash at some point is going to have some effect. And then some of my really smart friends who think a lot about this and are deep experts in data analysis and in ways that I wouldn't even aspire to be because what they do is so sophisticated. They're worried about what they call model collapse, which is that, as more and more content becomes AI generated on the internet, the models feeding on themselves, it's like like when you have a TV, there's images of the TV with the little TV inside and the little TV going all the way back. I mean, it's
Mm,
like that. That at some point when there's so much nonsense out there that it's just not going to mean anything. And that's why I do think that these small language models, custom language models, sovereign AI, whatever you call it, is important. And I think that you're going to see more people uh paying for quality, paying for things where you understand the underlying logic, what's in the black box. And those are important skills, and we just need to make sure that everybody else is more AI literate. I mean, we have lots of problems with media literacy these days, and people not knowing what to believe. And I think that that's a really big thing. I think we need to go back to civic education, and that needs to be a big part of civic education. Yes, go do your own research, but first of all, research how to do research, how to judge what is credible and what is not.
yeah, well, that that
I
gives me
have
some hope.
go ahead, JB.
No, that this gives us a hope because otherwise, if people just begin questioning AI, they can question everything they read, and including the well-sourced, um, content. To use a horrible word that's out there. If they're gonna question AI, they're gonna question everything. But yes, if it leads them to subscribe, and that means financially supporting journalist outlets or posts that are reliable and have the financial infrastructure to hire what copy editors or proofreaders or just to I mean I subscribe as Jim does. We subscribe to Washington Post, New York Times, and we we're supporting these institutions, but I don't know if enough people are. And there are a lot more people watching nonsense YouTube videos full of absolute rubbish than are reading the New York Times.
Well,
Uh,
there's a lot of there's a lot of AI mimicry out there. If you can see videos on YouTube, you can hear copycat AI on any streaming service, streaming music service. So, I have two thoughts in my head. One is, we're talking about quality of music, of fine art, of literature. I think it's safe to say that AI is producing based on the past. Everything that's in existence is is what it draws from. That's the well that it uses to fuel output. At a certain time, you could never get Jimi Hendrix produced by AI. You can now, and I think maybe the test for someone with a good ear is is this prose? Is this poetry? Does it sound like it came from Hallmark? Does the music sound like it came out of an elevator? It's probably AI. But you know what we're talking about now, I think all of us is we're talking about the retail output of AI, what we see on an everyday query. How many bananas do I need to put in my smoothie? Or, I don't know. Tell me about what Madonna's doing these days. But I happen to be at my cafe with a friend of mine who's a coder, and he opened up his screen. I said, "Why are there two columns?" And it was all code. And he said, "Well, I have an AI agent. I pay $200 a month for a subscription. It's writing code." I go, "Right now?" And I did see one of the columns moving, certain text boxes lighting up. It was writing code for him. So, Michelle, from a risk perspective, as we gain more and more agentic AI behind the scenes doing stuff that we can't see, what is what do we what's the potential risk here? Is are I think we're are we does it can we classify the AI revolution as a gray rhino? Probably
Oh
not
yeah.
because we're talking about it. Well,
No, the
what's
gray
your
rhino
what's
is
your
what you're
reaction?
talking about. When people are
Mm,
talking about it, that's what the gray rhino is. It's the obvious, it's the probable, it's the visible. And one of the things that I urge people to do is to break it down into the individual parts of it, because AI itself is a crash of gray rhinos. so many things. So you're starting to see these agentic AIs coming out and talking among themselves about how to go places where they're not supposed to go and get into trouble they're not supposed to get into. And that's the kind of thing that we've been hearing a lot of warnings about. So that's, I think, a very, very big one. These agents going and doing their own thing with potentially very, very bad consequences. I mean, I don't know I mean, I know there's a lot of talk in within militaries about the use of AI in decision making and things like that. But what if AI's got access to some of that. When's it going to get into the nuclear codes and really do stuff it's not supposed to? So that's one thing. There's the other part that I was talking about not getting skills. It's about uh, cognitive offloading. For example, I mean,
Getting dumber. We're
yeah, we're
getting
getting
dumber.
dumber. We are willing well, some people are willingly turning that over. I think about, they're the only phone numbers that I remember are phone numbers that I knew before cell phones. And is that a sensible thing to offload? Well, actually, I think, I don't need my brain space for remembering phone numbers. There are some things that it's great to have something else to do for you. Or, directions. Yeah, how many places do you remember how to go without GPS? And of course, it is useful if you've got Waze or something saying, "Hey, the traffic's really bad here. Go the other way." But what are the skills that we can't afford to offload, and how are we going to make sure that humans are able to be critical of the output and to guide it, and then to ring fence the more dangerous potential activities. And you hear all this, oh, less regulation means more innovation. But, there's some areas where uh, you need some ring fencing. You need people who understand what is going on and have a policy framework to make sure that this stuff doesn't get way out of control. And you're starting to see those conversations coming out of some of the AI companies themselves going, hey, this is a problem. Okay, we can't release this one because it's we don't know how to control it. That's a whole other area of scariness. So there's they're really scary things. And you see, for example, with designers. I know a lot of designers who've been having trouble because people are just you know using AI. And there are things that I'll use AI for if I'm writing a Substack and I only have 10 minutes to come up with an artwork. Then obviously that's not work that was going to go to a human in the first place. But for other projects, you still really do want a human with judgment. Or in the editing and copy everything. I love things that will flag typos for me, but I find that many of the AIs flagging writing will flag things that are wrong. I mean, I would throw out 3/4 of the suggestions that it makes. um so it's how do we ensure that people still have those skills?
Well, Boomer has it, audience. You just got a free risk assessment. You didn't have to pay 1 cent to a leading risk analyst get get the full scoop on AI and its risks.
Yeah. And technically I am Gen X. I'm just on the other side, but but lots of boomers in my life, and I really respect that
That's fair.
generation.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yes, we're just
we're glad.
we're not that many years apart.
It's nice to hear from the
I'm
younger
on the I'm
generation.
on the cusp. It's like, my birthday's on the cusp. And so if I don't like one horoscope, then I can read the other one and I can like, okay, maybe there's some things I want to include myself in this
Oh,
other
the
generation with,
boomers.
which including you guys. I love talking with you guys. So that's definitely a benefit where I can say, okay, I'll hop to the other one. It depends on what year you put as the dividing line.
Yeah,
We'll give
sure.
you it. You're Generation X, but it's you should
I'm
get some boomer
old,
friends.
old Gen X.
Okay. All right. Good. Fair enough. Well, it's lovely to have you on. There's so much. It's such an incredible subject, and there's just a lot to think about here.
And great
Yeah,
to see you guys
Michelle,
again.
thank you
What a
for your
great reunion.
generosity. Thank you for your generosity, your time. Yeah, and a great reunion too.
Jim, do you have a head quake for us this week?
I do have a head quake, but it comes with a disclosure. My friend's daughter was a co-writer for a hit single by an artist named Sienna Spiro, who's English, and her global hit is called "You Stole the Show." And I'm big supporter of my friend and his daughter. She was, as I mentioned, co-writer. Her partner is a co-writer and producer. It's a beautiful song that starts off with a large, big orchestral strains, and then leads into simple piano accompaniment. It reminded me a little of Carole King. And then this young woman's voice that gets big and large and emotional, and it's a pretty great moment. She's on fire right now. You'll see her on the cover of Elle magazine and Rolling Stone, and she's topping the charts. So
What's her name?
Sienna Spiro, who is exploding.
And what's the name of the song?
It's the from the Visitor album. It's called "You Stole the Show," which is what I always say about you.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'll keep out an ear for that and an eye for that. Well, my head quake is I'm going to start with a question. Has anyone ever called you a Yank?
Um, no.
No,
Although
maybe.
I will be in the UK at some point.
Yeah, maybe when you come to the UK to visit me, you'll be called a Yank. If you were called a Yank, would you sue?
Is
Would you
it
sue?
is it a bad word?
Well, this has come up because although it wouldn't occur me to sue anyone who called me Yank, it did occur to someone called Raymond Joseph, an American working at a Pizza Express in Aberdeen, Scotland, who managed to alienate all of his coworkers, one of whom called him the Y word. More specifically, his coworker said, "Why don't you just leave? Nobody effing likes you." He didn't say effing, he used the F word. "Nobody effing likes you, you effing American. Go back to your country, you effing Yank." Joseph sued him for racial harassment, and a Scottish judge recently ruled in his favor, awarding him £5,000 damages. So, I don't remember being ever called a Yank. No, think I was when I was in boarding school, briefly in a British boarding school. Um, but it would never occur to me to sue anyone. The word Yank is a diminutive of Yankee, which is used a lot in the lexicon. I think it might even be the name of a sports team of some kind, the New York Yankees.
Yeah, I think they're a football team, I think, or
Football team,
cricket,
yes, ice
something.
hockey, and that they inspired a musical called Damn Yankees. That could be sued doubly.
Ooh, 2 bad words.
2 bad words. John Schlesinger made a film called Yanks, Yankee Doodle Dandy. It's a word used a lot. Anyway, apparently it's a racial epithet. I had no idea.
More obvious, I mean, sort of the more obvious question is, what do you put on a Scottish pizza? Does it come with haggis? Does
Haggis,
haggis
all
come on
the
a pizza?
haggis pizza, please. Yes. Well, it's a Pizza Express. That's part of a chain. I'll take you to one when you visit me in, in September. Okay.
Prawns.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you very much for listening and watching us. It's been Boomer Has It. I'm JD Miller in London.
And I'm Jim Jalamis in Brooklyn.
Thanks. Bye bye.